We're working on the corner of the table, and our bow wrap is cut on the bias, so you've got some stretch to this fabric, and that'll help when you're covering the curvatures. So you're going to want to start by squaring off one end and folding under about 3/4 of an inch. And what I've done is I've sprayed the tacking side of the bow with a little bit of glue. And this will help as I'm putting my bow wrap in place. I can just kind of press it in place, and that gives me a good start without having to stick nails in there. So that's our first step, to get the bow wrap nice and straight along the bow. Nice and straight along the bow. And then our bow wrap is longer than need be, so at this end you're going to find your stop point and make sure you cut it a good inch longer than necessary. So on this end we're going to be able to fold under the excess. So we're going to fold that up. Actually, our bracket is way up here, so we're going to take some more off. Our bow wrap trimmed off and even with our bracket underneath. And then we're going to anchor that fold with a staple. And one trick you can do around the corner is take and flare this bow wrap so that you get as much stretch out of the curve as you can. So just little slits like that. You don't want to cut beyond where you're going to staple, but that'll allow you to pull that bow wrap nice and tight and get rid of all the wrinkles. And you can staple or nail. Since this is a tan top, I'm using stainless steel nails so we don't get any rusting. We've got our bow wrap on, and we're happy with how it looks. On the underneath side it's nice and smooth, so we're just going to go ahead and trim all of our excess off. And the little rule of thumb here is you don't want to leave this so long. Like if we trimmed it here, this edge would peek out on the front side of your bow. So you really want to be back at least 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the bow so that you don't have anything peeking out on the inside of the car. This is covered in the actual top material, and we're wrapping between the two mounting brackets, and then we'll take another short piece which is cut on the bias to wrap the curved area. The reason I'm doing that is this is an original bow. The customer did not remove his brackets, so I'm not going to remove the brackets and risk not being able to get them back in properly. So we're going up to the bracket and starting on the other side and wrapping the curvature. The rear window into the rear curtain for a Roadster, you want to separate your frame parts, removing all of the little screws, and be very careful not to move the keepers. You're going to want those to line right back up with your frame when you set that back in place. So don't take this apart any sooner than you have to. As soon as you take it apart, you want to leave it laying right in place on the table. Your instructions, either with your window or in our installation instructions, you'll find a sheet that tells you how high the rear window should be. And this says a 28-29 Roadster should be 6 inches up, and that's the bottom of the frame from the bottom of the rear curtain on center. There is a bit of an arch to the bottom of this rear curtain, so you want to take it from center point up 6 inches, and that should be the very bottom of your frame. So find center on the frame, find center on your curtain, get that properly aligned. And then you want to mark each one of these screw holes. And we're using a very sharp China marker. And you just, without budging the frame, you want to mark each one of those. Now we're going to take that away and punch each of those holes with a very small punch. Okay, before we set the window into the curtain, we wrapped the edge of the glass with a cloth tape, something like electrical tape or hockey stick wrapping tape. So in each of the sockets that you're screwing into, there's a thread in there that moves around. So it's best to take a peek and get those on center so you can slide them off to the side. You want to get those right in center before you lay your fabric over. And then our fabric is lined up. Use a scratch awl to line all those parts up before you try to put your screw in. And it should find the threads. And I just barely start the screw. I don't tighten it at this point. I'm just starting it. And I'm going to work diagonal. So I put one here, I'll put one here. I'll put one here, I'll put one here. And keep working your way out around the frame. And then, once they're all started, we do the same thing and give them each one twist. So that you're tightening the frame down evenly, and you don't want to over tighten it or you'll crack your glass. When we put our pad sets on, we put our windshield flap in place. And as you recalled, we were lining up our snaps earlier. We got those set in place so it's snapped to the windshield, and then this lays over the top of the windshield frame. And then you want to leave a little bit of slack. We don't want to stretch it real tight. We just want to leave a little slack and bring that around to the front of the bow and staple it off and trim it. Step is to lay the pad set on. And we want to make sure that our pad is ending up out here on the curve of the bow. And we want to make sure it's not coming down lower than this fastener. So we've lined that up with a nice straight line. We're not dipping down below the front bow. We're coming right at about center. And then we're going to anchor one point here and one point here, giving it a nice stretch. And then we've also anchored it to the center bowl, just through the pad material. The purpose of the pad set is to give a little cushion pad over the hip of the bow. So you want to make sure you're covering that curvature of the bow. We've anchored it first along the back and front, and the line we're watching for is that we're running parallel just above this fastener. This is a side curtain fastener. So we want to be just above that so we're not in the way for putting on the side curtains. And then once we've anchored front and back, we can put a few staples through just the wrapping of this pad. We are not going to staple through the actual padding, but I did anchor just to keep that pad set nice and neat. Then you want to pull tight to the back and make sure there are no wrinkles here, because if it shows out here, it's going to show inside. And we'll do the same thing up front now. See the wrinkles? We're going to just stretch that along the bow to get that nice and taut. Pad wrap for the lining. And we're going to feather our padding so that the pad fills out the complete width of our wrap. So that means the under layer is a little bit shorter than the top layer. You always want your top layer the smoothest, because that's what the main top deck is going to rest on. So we want to feather our padding and make sure we're filling out from seam to seam. And I am going to give one staple right up at the top here, kind of as an anchor, to hold that pad so it doesn't eventually slide down in the middle of this padding. So once we're happy with the way our pad is laid in there, we roll up our materials, bring the top cover down, and we're going to hand stitch this shut. Sewn our pad set shut, and the best way to do that is with a curved needle. You can see that. That allows you to go in the fold of the fabric, and it naturally comes back to you at about an inch interval. So you go through the fold, come out and then go through the lining material. And I don't mind catching the pad right there because that'll stabilize the pad and hold it in place. So if you have a curved needle, that makes that job easier. Now we're going to trim the pad at the rear bowl. And what I like to do is feather these layers so that you don't have a real blunt ending to your pad. And what feathering means is you're going to cut the under layer just ahead of the rear bowl. And get rid of that. So that layer ends just ahead of the rear bowl. And then we're going to let our outermost layer, or the side closest to the top, overextend that about 1/2 inch. So you can see we have our layers feathered. And then our bowl wrap, or our pad wrap, will come and get nailed in here. And that ends up nice and smooth. Okay, part of the preparation before you can put the main top on the car is to get all of the fasteners installed. So we have replaced the lift dot post that this car had on it with the correct cinch stud fasteners. So we started at the center of the rear curtain and we put that stud in, and then we lined up our metal band and we put the next 2 out. And you want to just keep working one stud at a time around the body rail of the car. So we've got a double layer here. You want to make sure you're using a long post so that 2 layers, 2 cinch grommets can fit on that stud. And so we're working out, you can see stud by stud out to the corner. And it looks like our top is going to fit just perfectly out to this snap. And then what we do is we anchor just the top of this curtain. That's going to pull our frame back to where it belongs and set it in place so we can start putting our pads on. We're setting our side panel, and a problem that customers have is getting this point in the right location. When you're setting this point of the curtain, you need to make sure you have allowed fabric to come up and around the curve of the bowl, and then pull straight up on this. If you pull this too tight, you're going to get this divot. So, and that's from pulling this too far forward. So you want to let that be loose. You want an upward stretch at this point of the curtain and an upward stretch around this curvature. That's how you'll get a nice straight curtain. What we've done to start our main top deck is lay the top on the car, and then our goal is to get our bindings to crisscross right at this point. So we've anchored one side and we've stretched like crazy. Mike's got his muscles going here to get this stretched over, so you will have to work. We want the top tight, and so we don't make the top any bigger than it needs to be, and you will need to stretch like crazy here. You're going to pull your cover straight forward and just let your lines follow straight, and then you're going to make a wedge cut right below the staple line. And you're going to bring that cut all the way back to about this point. And then we're going to wrap that side panel under the bow and stretch it as tight as we can, and curve it up under and staple this line. And our trim will cover that seam.